The door was open. I just went back and reread my speech on the floor. Because, gentlemen, I hadn't done that yet. I went back and reread my speech on the floor. I stand by every word of that speech. And in it, I referenced the fact that I had just a few months prior had been in agreement with some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle with respect to January 6th. There's disagreements on our side of the aisle on some of that with respect to the votes at the time. And that I'd taken very strong disagreement and sought apology from our colleague on our side of the aisle about some of the remarks that were said, but felt that this was not the right path to go down.
The atmosphere inside the House chamber was already tense before Ilhan Omar even took the floor. As she began to speak, her tone carried a steady conviction, her words touching on injustice, inequality, and what she described as deeply ingrained bias within the nation's political system. But beneath her composed delivery, there was a visible discomfort spreading across the room. To many lawmakers, this sounded less like a plea for understanding and more like another attempt to sidestep accountability for her earlier controversial statements. Every sentence she spoke seemed to sharpen the divide in the room, building an invisible pressure. Chip Roy sat motionless, his expression focused but unreadable, as murmurs rippled through the chamber. The tension was unmistakable. Something was about to erupt, and everyone could sense it. Then came the shift. When Chip Roy finally rose to respond, the entire chamber seemed to reset. The chatter stopped. His posture was calm, his voice steady, yet his words carried the weight of authority. He didn't shout or grandstand. He didn't need to. With deliberate precision, Roy began dismantling Omar's argument point by point, calling out what he described as emotional appeals meant to deflect from a record that had too often sown division. He reminded everyone that real leadership isn't defined by playing the victim or seeking sympathy. It's measured by honesty, responsibility, and the courage to confront hard truths. As he continued, his tone grew sharper, more deliberate. Roy referenced past remarks that had strained alliances and inflamed debate, turning what could have been dialogue into discord. His speech was not fiery, but surgical, each line landing with a quiet force that commanded attention. By the time he finished, the silence that followed said everything.
Thank you for holding this very important hearing. I'm no stranger to discrimination, hate speech, or threats of violence against my family and myself simply because of my identity. As a Black, visibly Muslim woman who came to this country as a refugee, I have dealt with racist, xenophobic, bigoted comments and threats all my life.
Feeling the weight of criticism closing in, Ilhan Omar pushed back with unrestrained emotion. Her voice rose with intensity as she accused Chip Roy of embodying the same establishment that, in her view, consistently silences and misunderstands marginalized voices. Her words carried both anger and conviction, painting Roy as a figure of privilege disconnected from the struggles she claimed to represent. The chamber reacted instantly. A wave of gasps and murmurs filled the air as her remarks echoed through the hall. It was no longer just a debate over principles. It was turning personal, raw, and volatile. While her passionate defense might have reignited support from her most loyal followers, it left many colleagues stunned. What was meant to be a show of strength had instead drawn a line that few could ignore. In that moment, Omar's attack didn't elevate her argument. It fractured the room even further. The fallout was immediate and explosive. Voices began clashing across the floor as lawmakers shouted over one another, struggling to regain control of the chaos that had erupted. Chip Roy rose again, demanding composure and respect for the chamber, but his calls were drowned out by the uproar. The speaker's gavel pounded relentlessly, echoing through the tension-filled air, yet the noise only seemed to grow. What had started as a policy dispute was now unraveling into a public breakdown of order, a moment of pure political theater witnessed live by the nation. Reporters rushed to capture every detail, sensing history unfolding in real time. Supporters of Roy accused Omar of disgracing the institution, while her allies argued she was being cornered and unfairly vilified. The divide was total, the atmosphere electric, and every camera in the room was locked on what no one could look away from, a confrontation that would be remembered long after the echoes faded.
Mr. Speaker, we've heard from my colleagues the reasons why the Representative Omar should be removed from this committee But I feel like all the reasons have not just yet been stated, which is why I rise to add for the record. We've heard about the comments that were made regarding anti-Semitism and anti-Israeli views, but I rise to add to the record that as a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I've sat there and heard the representative actually spew anti-American rhetoric as well. I've been in that committee room where the representative equates Israel and the United States to Hamas and the Taliban. Absolutely unacceptable for a member of that committee. I've also heard the representative equate that it is the United States' fault that there is turmoil in Venezuela.
When calm finally returned to the chamber, Chip Roy rose once more, this time not as a participant in debate, but as a man on a mission. What followed would come to define his political legacy. With a steady voice and unwavering focus, Roy began laying out a detailed timeline of Ilhan Omar's most polarizing moments. He revisited her remarks about 9/11, her controversial statements on foreign policy, and a long trail of comments that had divided both parties. Yet his message was clear. This wasn't about identity, race, or religion. It was about principles that hold every elected official accountable. His tone sharpened with conviction as he reminded the chamber that leadership demands honesty, even when the truth is uncomfortable. Then came the line that would echo beyond those walls. "If we cannot hold ourselves to a higher standard," he said firmly, "how can the American people trust us to lead them?" The room fell into complete silence. Each word landed with precision, cutting through the political noise like a blade. What Roy delivered wasn't anger, it was clarity, and it hit harder than any accusation could. Even among Omar's closest allies, the shift was visible. Eyes dropped, murmurs faded, and the weight of his words filled the AIRAS. The final echoes of his speech faded. The energy in the room changed completely. Lawmakers who had once stood firmly in Omar's corner began to step back, speaking in hushed tones and avoiding her gaze. The atmosphere was no longer one of defense or loyalty. It had turned into quiet reckoning. Roy's address had set a new standard, forcing even his critics to confront uncomfortable truths about integrity and accountability within their own ranks. Behind closed doors, private conversations turned serious. Whispers about whether Omar's repeated confrontations had finally crossed a line. For years, she had defied backlash and emerged resilient. But this moment felt different. The air around her seemed heavier, the support thinner, and for the first time, even her allies hesitated to stand beside her.
Could associate myself and do with all the remarks of the gentleman from South Carolina. I have very strong disagreement with a lot of the statements that Representative Omar has made. We've covered most of them. That some people did something is one that really sticks in my craw pretty strongly. Raises a whole lot of flags. I think there are significant amount of justifications to raise issues with respect to service on the Foreign Affairs Committee, but I would not go down this road. But I'm also reminded, August of 1993, Juan Gonzalez was a batter for the Texas Rangers and was punked by Alex Fernandez from the White Sox. And a little bit later, Robin Ventura came to the plate for the White Sox, and Nolan Ryan was on the mound. And Robin knew what was about to happen. Nolan plunked him. And then Robin Ventura charged the mound, and then Nolan Ryan beat the crud out of him on the mound. That's what happened. We all know that's what happened. Old school baseball. Nolan Ryan defined old school baseball. This is raw politics. That's what this is. When the doors open, then there's a question. You have to decide what you're going to do. We're not going to unilaterally disarm. Just not going to do it. I'm tired of that. It just is what it is. Guys took a shot at someone on our team, about statements I disagreed with, and took very much to task. But I've got strong disagreements with Representative Omar. I would prefer, if it were just starting from scratch, I would not choose this path. I would just say, Say whatever stuff you all want to say. We'll say whatever stuff we want to say. Our managers will pick our team. Let's go battle it out in committee. That's what I would say. I would say that's the right place to be. But at this point in time, it is my considered judgment that, like Nolan Ryan, we've got to respond. And I'm just going to be blunt and honest about it. That's just my belief. I think it's
The following day, Congress reconvened beneath a cloud of scrutiny that stretched far beyond the Capitol walls. The nation was watching, and the air inside the chamber felt heavier than ever. Cameras lined every angle, journalists filled the gallery, and the question on everyone's mind was clear. Would there be consequences for what had unfolded? The political world waited for answers as Chip Roy once again took the lead, standing firm in his call for accountability. His argument was simple yet piercing. If lawmakers could publicly demean their colleagues without consequence, what message did that send to the American people about the integrity of their government? Roy spoke with controlled intensity, insisting that the issue was not about personal animosity, but about preserving the dignity of Congress itself. Around him, debate erupted in waves. Some members warned that censuring or removing Omar might set a troubling precedent, one that could silence dissenting voices in the future. Others countered that allowing her behavior to go unchecked would weaken the very foundation of trust the institution relied upon. The divide was deep, but the tide seemed to be shifting. The push for disciplinary action was gaining undeniable momentum, and even those who hesitated to speak out could sense which way the wind was blowing. When Ilhan Omar finally took the stand, the chamber fell into a tense, anticipatory silence. Her expression was resolute, yet her voice trembled between defiance and fatigue. She spoke of being singled out, of feeling targeted not for her words, but for her identity. She recounted her struggles, her journey, and her lifelong mission to speak for those who often go unheard. But the energy in the room was different now. The empathy that once followed her speeches had faded. Each sentence seemed to land without resonance, met with quiet stares instead of applause. By the time she finished, the silence wasn't respectful, it was weary. Lawmakers sat motionless, many avoiding her gaze. Her final defense no longer carried the conviction that once defined her. It sounded more like a plea than a declaration, an attempt to salvage what was left of her reputation. In that moment, it became painfully clear that the political ground beneath her had shifted. The power, the support, the influence she once wielded, all of it had begun to slip away, leaving only the echo of a career unraveling in real time.
That is not because of the oppressive socialist and communism that has spread throughout Central and South America and Venezuela at the hands of the Maduro and Hugo Chavez regimes. That is unacceptable. And as a New York representative, to hear the representative belittle, to try to diminish the worst terrorist attack on United States soil on September 11, 2001, as some people did something, that is unacceptable as well. And I hold the same standard for this side of the aisle that I do the other, because when another colleague on my side said something about 9/11, I also voted to have her removed from the Education Committee because I thought that was inappropriate. So I'm being consistent here, and I hope my colleagues will do the same to show that this is about consistency and accountability, because we should not have an individual with those views on the committee that is tasked with representing our country and our Congress to foreign nations. I yield back.
And I hope we'll get through this. We'll kind of hip check each other. Maybe we can sit down and figure out by the end of this Congress, next Congress, whoever's in charge, we figure out how we're going to play ball going forward and set those rules. Now, I'd say the same thing about open rules, closed rules, structured rules. And the ranking member can scoff. We've had X number of votes. We'll have continued debate about this stuff over time. There will be closed rules. There will be structured rules. There will be open rules. I'd like to have that debate. I'd like to have the considered judgment of the ranking member on that, and I have debate on my side of the aisle. I'm just saying that we can figure out how to protect this institution and try to decide how to do things the right way. But in this instance, I'm going to be very open and honest about why I'm going to vote for this resolution. That's why. Again, recognizing the statements that the representative made, I find to be highly problematic, extremely concerning. Raising very serious questions from a foreign affairs perspective, as the ranking member has raised about statements made and how he feels about people being on certain committees over here.
Gentlemen,
I think we should, in my opinion, we should withdraw from that battle going forward and then let each manager pick their team, and I'll be glad to yield to Jonathan Call.
and I would simply say I appreciate Mr. Roy's honesty. Again, similar to what Mr. Massey said previously, not to belabor the point, because I think you've already conceded this, but why not emulate the same resolution that was used in the past as opposed to calling this something that it is not in terms of the due process? That's the part that I just didn't understand, because it doesn't provide due process.
So,
as you said, it's partisan. It's not. And again, I appreciate the honesty on front, and obviously, the president's the decider and the rest.
I would. I don't want to interrupt.
No.
Yeah, I would just say, agreeing with the gentleman from Kentucky, putting something in the whereas clauses, outlining a, I think, genuine statement by the speaker on our side or whatever, saying that would be taken into consideration and viewed is something. It is something. It is not, I will be very clear, due process in the way we mean it in court. This is not a court. This is not due process in that sense. The question here is what we're going to do as members to afford each other the opportunity to speak, be heard. I'm much more in the favor of let each other speak and be heard. You know, then go use your First Amendment rights to go say why you think that person said something crazy or disagreeable. I would prefer to be in that space. I have no problem with that language being in the whereas clauses. I'm not going to go trumpet it as some grand, amount of due process. It's something. It's something in there, and I'd hang my hat on it and say, yeah, go argue the ethics and make the claim. But that's not what this is about. I mean, let's just be clear. Ryan Plunk's Ventura for a reason. And I yield back.
Gentlelady from Indiana is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.